Okay, so to start, we're going to start by making our little soap dough moons. Aren't they pretty? I'm starting out with just my basic recipe, and I just let it sit until it turned to soap dough. But I do suggest Sorcery Soaps, which makes the best soap dough, in my opinion. Mine is a little more sticky, so I am actually adding a little cornstarch on the base as well as on my dough before I roll it out, so it's not sticking to the mat and it's not sticking to my rolling pin. And I'm rolling it fairly thin because there's so many elements that will be on Moonchild, so I don't want it to take up too much space. I'm now laying cling wrap over the top because it just creates a very rounded, really clean press. And I'm using, I would say it's the second size up cookie cutter, round cookie cutter. And I'm now using little ball tools in different sizes, just creating variation so I can kind of get that crater impression. Don't add too many craters, but you know, this is my moon. It's probably not how the moon really looks. So just adding a few randomly, clustering a couple together always seems to look nice. Just tapping down those sides to make sure that it stays nice and round. Now I'm starting out with a more matte mica. You could actually use titanium dioxide, but I'm just dusting this all over the moons first so that I have a nice like slick area to work with, and it'll be easier when I blend and layer the other colors over the top. I'm using a fluffier brush. You want to try to stay away from a more stiff bristled brush just for this technique because you're doing a lot more blending. Now I'm adding a more iridescent mica, and I'm not adding it over the entire moon, just randomly, really focusing on the areas that are more flat, not the areas that have craters. I'm going to use a darker tone for the areas that are more cratered. Spraying it with some rubbing alcohol. This helps it stick better. It also will help with blending as well. Now I'm adding a gray. All of the micas that I have here I will list below for you, and I'm just, like I said before, I am focusing and targeting the areas where craters are, because the moon has variations in color, and so I'm just kind of trying to mimic that as much as I can. I'm now going back over with the same same light white mica, back over in the areas that were flat. And I spray alcohol over the area periodically because it makes it so much easier for blending. So once you've layered a couple layers, if you spray it with some rubbing alcohol, it will help kind of blend out those grays, as you can see, so that it will be more muted and blended. And now I'm just layering a little more gray over the top. This way I can get more depth of color, just variations, and the more you blend, the lighter it gets, and then you can go back over it with additional colors as you need. And I'm finally finishing it off with some super sparkle, just so that it kind of creates that, I don't know, that light reflecting that you get when you look at the moon. I just thought it would work. So, and of course you can never go wrong with sparkle, right? Okay, so we're on to our base. I'm starting out by just breaking up some of the lye that has solidified a little bit. I'm also using citric acid in my lye solution this go round. So if you're interested in what that does, just give me a like and I will include it in a future video. I'm also mixing in my clay and milks into my oil. Now adding my titanium dioxide, because as you know, the childlike Empress had like a full white situation going on, so we want to kind of make it as white as we can. That ivory tower. And we are pouring in our lye solution. Y'all, please excuse my lye solution container. I'm still unpacking things and can't find everything. Okay, so we're just gonna siphon off just a little bit. This will be for piping. We're gonna let that sit so that it has time to kind of firm up. And I am using a already cut little mat, lace mat, and I'm using a fluffy brush, and we're just gonna dust a little of that beautiful shimmer white that we used on the moon. I believe it's called Here Comes the Bride. Like I said, I will list everything below in the description box for you. And I'm not really caring about making everything super even. I just kind of wanted to create like a little of that shimmer over the top of the all white lace, because everything will be white except for the Himalayan pink sea salt. Adding more white because we need to make sure that she is nice and creamy white. And now it's time for Brambleberry's beautiful, oh, this is such a pretty fragrance, Moon Child fragrance. Now, it does say that there is no discoloration, but there is slight acceleration. Now, keeping in mind, this was completely workable. It did kind of thicken up on me, but I use a lot of hard oils in my recipe. And I also used citric acid, which definitely affected my my base, so keep that in mind. So it's still very workable, and it's an absolutely gorgeous fragrance. I think this is one of my favorites. It is probably out of this collection, it's my favorite. And of course we have to get it all out. Now, because it's thicker, I will need to bang it a little bit more aggressively to kind of get out as many of the air bubbles as possible. And now that it's all flattened out some, I am cleaning off those edges because I'm obsessed. And even though this will actually be the bottom, because remember the lace is going to be the top, I still want to kind of smooth it down a little bit. I am going to cut that bottom a little bit, but you know. On to piping. So here I'm starting off by showing you this nice creamy texture that is nice for piping. I like it a little more firm, so I'm going to wait a little bit. And I'm using the 101 piping tip. We're going to start by mixing the salts with the coarse Brambleberry sea salts. Beautiful. And we're going to add Here Comes the Bride yet again. And just creating like a nice shimmery rock moonstone kind of, not really moonstone, but just really pretty shimmery salts. This is the texture I like when I'm piping. It just creates nice, pretty, distinct petals. So we're going to go ahead and get our piping bag ready and get to piping. I will have a newer rose piping tutorial with more talk through again. So this is really me just showing you how I created those roses. I'm really not going to go through. If you are interested like right now and don't want to wait for an updated video on rose piping, I do currently have an older video. Just I'll actually link it somewhere above. If not, I will make sure it's in the description box below. And but I did want to show you what I was doing, and this is a little bit different than the rose piping that we did in my latest video, or my last video. Rose piping is like the foundation for all other piped flowers, and so I really want to create an updated rose pipe video first before we get into other types of flowers and things. But I'm excited to show a few new flowers and some previous flowers that I made and how I make them. My body naturally wants to bring the flower back towards me. That's why I end up out of shot at some points, because I'm trying to make sure that my petals are even and that they are proportioned, and it's a little more difficult. Time to reveal our beautiful lace, and as you can see, the shimmer just kind of highlights that lace a bit. We are actually not cutting, we are just kind of creating marking spots so that when I'm piping it'll be, and putting everything in, it'll just be easier than using my ruler method. So now we are just creating a nice pretty scallopy base, just so that it looks attractive and it's not just blobs of piped soap on the top when we add in all of our little embeds, those moons and beautiful sea salts and our piped roses. So here I am showing you the moons. We're adding those really close to the cut line, not on the cut line, but right before it. And I had already pre-cut all of my moons in half. So you don't need to make a lot if you want to make the half moon situation on one of your soaps. You know, just make enough that when you cut them in half, it'll create enough for your soap. When I cut my moons, I tried to make sure that I got a little bit of crater on each end, so just so you know. And now I'm adding these beautiful Himalayan sea salt, pink sea salts. I actually crushed them a little bit more with a hammer, so I got smaller bits. And then right next to it, we are adding our little piped roses we created. And I'm just pressing it into the piped soap that we had already established. And now we have our beautiful Brambleberry sea salt. And I'm actually intricately placing these sea salts because I don't want them on my cut line, just because it can affect how, you know, of course the cutter cuts. You know, some people just kind of sprinkle it, and I usually do just sprinkle it, and then when I cut, I'll turn it on its side. But because I was only going to be adding just a few for the aesthetics piece of it, and that shimmer detail, I wanted to make sure that it was placed in just the precise locations away from the cut line, more surrounding the pink Himalayan sea salt. And finally, we are going to add some little tiny leaves that I created. Some little, of course, everything is pretty much ivory, with the exception of that pink Himalayan sea salt. And the pink Himalayan sea salt really just came from that kind of blush pink look that the childlike Empress had. That's what inspired me, and the beautiful rose quartz that Brambleberry added to the boxes, of course.